Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today, we're taking your sources really fascinating material on ancient prophecies, and, well, we're diving deep.
That's the plan.
Our mission is to unpack how these visions, specifically from the Bible and the Qur'an, are seen through the Baha'i lens. We're looking for those aha moments.
Exactly. Connections.
Cutting through the noise to find those surprising links.
That's right. In this deep dive, we'll be looking at how these different threads, these prophecies, are sort of woven together.
Okay.
We'll touch on chronological calculations, things like 1,260 years.
Right, those numbers.
And symbolic stuff, too, like the holy city, the two witnesses. The idea is to see how these ancient texts point towards, well, historical fulfillments.
Specifically the Bahb and Bahá'u'lláh.
Yes, their missions, how it creates this cohesive narrative across time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with those timelines. Daniel's prophecy, right? This is where it gets really interesting with the numbers. The idea of prophetic days meaning years.
Definitely. It's foundational.
When I first saw these calculations, the precision just seemed, well, compelling. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. So Daniel 8, verses 13 and 14, it predicts this period 2,300 days until the sanctuary is cleansed.
Okay, 2,300 days.
Now, for someone maybe new to this, thinking days mean years might feel like a bit of a jump.
Yeah, a little.
But this day for a year idea, it's actually a pretty common interpretive key in prophetic texts across different traditions, really.
Right. It's a known way of reading these.
Yes. It lets you map these old visions onto, huge stretches of history.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating in itself, how prophecy might unfold over centuries.
Right. So how does the math work for the 2,300 days?
Okay, so if you apply that principle, the calculation is, well, remarkably precise. You start with Artaxerxes' decree. That's 457 BCE.
Got it. 457 BC.
From then until Christ's birth, you've got 456 years.
Oh, okay.
Then, from Christ's time until 1844 CE, that's another 1,844 years.
Right.
Add those up, 456 plus 1844, what do you get?
2,300, exactly.
Exactly, 2,300 years.
Huh.
And it culminates precisely in the Bab's declaration in 1844 CE.
Wow. Okay, that timing is, quite specific.
It's an extraordinary alignment, yeah.
So then how does the other Daniel prophecy, Daniel 9, the 70 weeks, fit into this? How does that connect?
Good question. The 70 weeks, which translates to 490 years.
70 times 7.
Right. They also start from that same decree of Artaxerxes. But these lead directly to Christ's martyrdom.
Okay, so the 2,300 years points to 1844, and the 490 years points to Christ.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here, when you look closely, is how it uses these precise lunar and solar cycles. It sort of double confirms Christ's advent through careful timing.
What do you mean lunar solar cycle?
Well, ancient calendars weren't quite the same as ours. You have lunar years, solar years. They differ slightly. The calculations here, they seem to account for that, aligning the prophecy with our Gregorian calendar really accurately. Yeah. It shows this amazing exactitude in the text.
It's incredible how these different time frames seem to build on each other, almost like nested predictions.
That's a good way to put it.
Then there's Daniel 12.7. A time, times and a half. Such an enigmatic phrase. What's that about in this framework?
Yeah, it sounds mysterious, doesn't it? But when you unpack it, a time, times and a half, that's usually taken as 1 plus 2 plus a half. Yeah. So 3.5 years.
3.5 years, okay.
And again, applying that day for a year principle.
That means 1,260 days.
Exactly. Which are understood as 1,260 years.
There's that number again, 1260.
Yes. And its fulfillment. It's seen as corresponding perfectly to the Islamic dispensation.
So the era initiated by Muhammad.
Precisely. Starting in 622 CE, the year of the Hijrah, and ending, guess when?
Let me guess. 1844.
1844 CE. Right when the Bab's mission began. So you see that date, 1844, just keeps emerging from these different prophecies.
The numbers definitely seem to have this consistent, almost architectural feel to them. It's quite something.
It is.
Okay, so we've looked at the numerical side. Let's shift gears a bit. Let's turn to the symbolic language, which is just as profound, right? Revelation 11, the two witnesses. How do figures like that offer insights into maybe the spiritual ups and downs of history?
Absolutely. The symbolism is incredibly rich. In this specific interpretation, the two witnesses are identified as Muhammad and Ali, son of Abu Talib.
Okay, Muhammad and Ali, why them?
Well, the symbolism lines up, according to this view. It says they were clothed in sackcloth.
Right. What does that signify?
It's interpreted to mean their teaching seemed continuous with past religions. They weren't presenting something radically new on the surface. The Quran, for example, is seen as aligning with the Torah and the Gospel in its core messages.
Like a continuation, not a break.
Exactly. And they're called two olive trees.
Olive trees, sources of light, oil.
Precisely. They're seen as these twin sources of divine wisdom that illuminated Arabia, bringing spiritual light, like oil for a lamp, to a place considered spiritually dark at the time. It gives you this insight into how new revelations often frame themselves as, well, renewals of ancient truths.
That's a really vivid interpretation. Okay, but then Revelation also mentions a beast, right? And a period where the witnesses' bodies lie dead. What's that symbolizing here?
Yeah, the beast. In this view, the beast isn't some literal monster, but it's identified as the Umayyad dynasty.
The early Islamic caliphate. That's a historical interpretation.
It is, and a powerful one. It shifts the focus from, an apocalyptic creature to a historical force that is understood to have undermined the spiritual core of Islam.
How so?
Well, the Umayyads, despite their huge political expansion, are seen here as having gradually moved away from the spiritual principles Muhammad and Ali established. They became more focused on worldly power, on empire.
Okay, so the beast represents a corruption from within.
That's the idea. And this connects directly to that period of the dead bodies, the 1,260 years of dead bodies.
The same 1,260 years we saw from Daniel.
The very same. It represents this long period where, yes, the outer forms, the rituals of the religion remained, but the inner life, the virtues, the spirit that had vanished.
So the bodies were there, but spiritually dead.
Exactly. The form persisted, but the vital essence was lost. A spiritual decline that lasted, again, right up until the Bab's revival in 1844.
And then, after this long decline, the resurrection of the witnesses. How does that play out? Who brings about this renewal?
Right, the resurrection. The text mentions 3.5 days before they rise.
Which, symbolically,
is that same period, 1,260 years. The resurrection represents the profound spiritual renewal brought about by the Bab.
The herald of the Baha'i faith.
Yes. And Qudus, one of his most important early disciples. Their mission, even though they were both martyred,
tragically, yes,
is seen as having spiritually restored Islam's original vibrant spirit. They essentially resurrected its true purpose and teachings for a new age.
So it highlights this powerful theme. Even when things look destroyed, spiritual truth can be revived.
Precisely. Renewal follows decline.
It really is striking how these timelines and symbols seem to converge on that mid-19th century period.
Okay, let's widen the lens again. Isaiah's prophecies. These are grand visions, not just about specific events, but like a transformed world, universal peace.
Yes, Isaiah's scope is vast.
How is the rod of Jesse prophecy in Isaiah 11 understood in this Baha'i perspective?
Okay, Isaiah 11 verses 1 through 9. It's a famous passage. Now, in this particular interpretation, it's seen as being fulfilled literally by Baha'u'lláh rather than, say, primarily by Christ.
Literally? How so? Give us some examples.
Well, take the line, "The wolf dwells with the lamb."
Classic image of peace. Right. It's seen symbolically, of course, representing historically hostile nations or groups wanting to unite. And observers point to the real, tangible interfaith harmony you can find within Baha'i communities today. People from incredibly diverse backgrounds, different religions, nations, races, living and working and worshiping together peacefully.
A kind of microcosm of that vision.
That's the idea. And then there's the phrase, "The earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord."
What about that one?
This is linked to the explosion of both scientific and spiritual progress observed globally since roughly 1844. Think about the rapid advances in communication, education, technology, things that connect humanity and spread knowledge like never before. It's seen as part of this unfolding plan.
Interesting. And Isaiah also talks about the gathering of Israel, right? A huge theme. How does Baha'u'llah's influence relate to that?
Yeah, that's a major prophecy. And the interpretation here connects it to historical events. The significant returns of Jewish people to Palestine in the last century or so.
Which Isaiah foresaw.
Which Isaiah clearly foresaw, yes. This physical return is seen, in this perspective, as being related to Baha'u'llah's broader call for the gathering of all peoples and the establishment of a just global order. The physical gathering is viewed as a kind of prelude or sign of the larger spiritual gathering of all humanity that's central to his teachings.
So a historical event reflecting a spiritual principle. That's quite profound.
It connects the tangible and the intangible.
Okay, let's dive into one more piece of Revelation chapter 12. The woman clothed with the sun. Very powerful imagery. What does she represent here, and how does it tie into this idea of a new heaven and earth?
Ah, Revelation 12, yes. The woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Powerful stuff.
Definitely.
Here, the woman is often interpreted as the religion of God itself, this eternal entity, always renewed.
Yeah.
And her child, the one she gives birth to, who is threatened by the dragon.
Yes.
That's understood to be the new revelation, the new manifestation of God bringing forth the divine teachings for the age.
And the new heaven and earth.
This connects directly. The Baha'i teachings are seen as fulfilling this promise, not just by renewing moral principles, but by actively aiming to transform the entire social order, creating a new civilization based on unity, justice, cooperation. It's about a fundamental shift, really, in human consciousness and how society is structured. A new spiritual reality, a new social reality.
A complete renewal. And what about the Ark of the Covenant mentioned later? How does that fit into this new context of unity and global order?
Good point. The Ark, historically, held the tablets of the covenant. In this interpretation, its spiritual counterpart is fulfillment, is found in Baha'u'llah's own covenant.
His specific writings.
Specifically through the Kitabiyat, that's the Book of the Covenant. This covenant is seen as unique because, unlike perhaps previous dispensations, it explicitly lays out mechanisms to ensure unity and, crucially, to prevent schism within the faith after his passing. It designates a clear line of succession and interpretive authority.
So it's a built-in protection for unity.
Exactly. And that really raises a vital question for anyone studying religion, doesn't it? How do you maintain unity in a new religious movement, especially when it grows and faces all sorts of pressures? The Baha'i Covenant offers one distinct answer to that challenge.
A very deliberate answer.
Very deliberate. So maybe we can summarize some key takeaways from this deep dive.
Yeah, let's pull it together.
Okay, first, we definitely saw this theme of numerical precision. How those prophetic days consistently get read as years, like the 1,260 years for the Islamic cycle, or the 2,300 years leading to 1844. There's a real pattern there.
Right, the numbers line up surprisingly often.
Then there's this idea of dual fulfillment. Prophecies seem to work on two levels. They can point to literal historical events, like the Bahb actually declaring his mission in 1844.
A specific moment in time.
But also to symbolic spiritual renewals, like the resurrection of the witnesses, representing the revival of divine virtues, the spirit of the religion.
So literal and symbolic happening together.
Exactly. And finally, the global impact. We saw how Baha'u'llah's teachings are viewed as fulfilling those grand, sweeping visions of Isaiah universal peace, the spread of knowledge inviting humanity into a fundamentally new era of unity.
It really is astounding when you step back and look at the sheer scope. These ancient texts from different faiths, different eras, and seeing how, through this particular lens, they seem to connect so intricately over thousands of years.
It's a vast tapestry.
So what does this deep dive mean for you listening in? I mean, it's clearly not just about memorizing dates or decoding symbols. It's more about seeing how these profound spiritual ideas might actually unfold across history, guiding humanity maybe through different stages, often in ways people didn't expect at the time.
Absolutely. And maybe it leaves you with this thought to ponder. What is the nature of prophecy itself? Is it like a fixed, detailed blueprint of the future?
Or something else?
Or is it more like a recurring pattern? A pattern of spiritual awakening that repeats across time, nudging humanity forward, calling it to its potential. Consider how these diverse ancient texts, when you view them through this Baha'i lens we've discussed, seem to present this really cohesive story, a narrative of humanity's spiritual journey, its evolution.
That's a great final thought. Is it a blueprint or a pattern of awakening? Something to definitely mull over.
Indeed.
Well, we encourage you, as always, to continue your own deep dives. Keep exploring how different traditions interpret history, how they connect events with spiritual insight. You'll find fascinating patterns in our shared human story.